What's up, everybody? This is John from Coding Addict, and welcome to another JavaScript Nuggets video. And in today's video, I want to continue with our callback function topic, and more specifically, show you what is a callback hell. So if you have been following along with the series, you know that in the last video, we covered callback functions, and even though callback functions are great and very widely used, there are some situations where promises and async await make our code easier to manage. Don't worry, I'm planning to start tackling promises in the next series video, but before we do that, let's struggle a bit and see what callback hell is all about. Lastly, even though in my example I use DOM, you'll face the same issues with any async operations if you want to perform them in a sequence. So picture this: in the index HTML, you have 3 heading 2s and a button. And then the idea is following, where you want to click on a button, and then once you click on a button, after 1 second, the first heading needs to turn red. Then after 3 seconds, the second heading needs to turn blue. And then after another 2 seconds, the third heading has to turn green. And in order to make it easier, I just added these classes, first, second, and third. And then, of course, I'm selecting here with query selector, and the same goes for the button. And just to test it out that I have wired up everything correctly, once I click on the button, of course, I can see the hello world. And with this most basic example, it's somewhat straightforward. Where essentially I want to set up 3 timeouts, correct? I just want to go with set timeout. Now, set timeout is looking for the callback, something we covered in the last video. And as a second argument, set timeout is looking for the time in how long this callback function should run. So this is our callback function. So this is going to run, and then we just need to say in how long. And in our case, for the first, well, it's going to be in 1 second. And we pass these values in the milliseconds. That's why we go with 1000. So essentially, this means 1 second. And now let's set up our logic. So we want our first heading to turn red. And we simply do that by going with first. So of course, that is my variable. Then we need to go with style and then color, style.color, and that equals red. And once I save and once I click, after 1 second, of course, my first heading turns red. Beautiful. Now I just want to copy and paste. So 1, 2, and just change these values around, correct? So I'm going to go with my second heading. Then in how long? Well, in 3 seconds. So we're going to go with 3000. And then as far as the color value, of course, this is going to be blue. And then lastly, we do the same thing for our third heading. So again, in 2 seconds in this case, we're going to go here, 2 seconds, and then the value will be green. So far, so good. Once I click on a button, of course, after 1 second, I have my first one, then the third one, and then the second one. However, imagine this. What if the requirements change and all of these actions need to run in the sequence? So notice right now, I have my first heading, then I have my third one, and only then I have the second one. But what if requirements are that I want still my first heading to turn red after 1 second, but then I want the second one, and that needs to happen after 3 seconds. So essentially, I want this one to turn in 4 seconds, and of course, the third one to turn in 6 seconds. And you're looking at it and you're like, okay, well, I can just change these values around. I can say here 4 seconds and then 6 seconds for my third one. But the idea is that you always want to depend on the first value. So as this changes, then of course, these values will change as well. So hard coding is not an option. Okay, so what is an option? Well, an option is setting back those values to whatever I had before. So this is going to be in 3 seconds. And then the third one will be in 2 seconds. And then we just need to pass in our set timeouts inside of the callback function. So I have my first set timeout. And then in the callback function, I apply my red color to the first heading. And since I want these things to happen in a sequence, now I just need to take my second set timeout, cut it out, and then paste it right after the code where I set my first heading to be red. And the same goes for the third one, where again, we cut it out from the main callback of the button, and then we need to place it right after the code where we set the color blue for the second heading. And now, of course, once we click, check it out. This is going to be 1 second. Then, of course, in 3 seconds, we'll have our second heading. And then in another 2 seconds, we'll have the third one. And now in this case, if this value changes, for example, to 5, then of course you can already guess that yes, after 5 seconds, my first heading is going to turn red, but then the rest of them will happen in sequence. So again, this is going to be 3 seconds after that, and then 2 seconds after the second one. Now, the problem with this code, and essentially the whole point of this video, is this. Take a look at our code. And essentially the problem is following, where it is getting harder and harder to manage our code. Yes, our functionality works. Everything is beautiful. But then as you're looking at it, you're like, okay, I want to change this one to green, but then actually this one is inside of the callback. So I need to make sure that everything is correct with the second one as well. And keep in mind that this is the most basic functionality. Essentially, we're just setting some colors. Normally, in a real world, you'll have way more complex logic inside of these callback functions. So this is something called Callback Hell, where essentially you have this pyramid-like structure. And essentially, this is a perfect situation where using promises and async await is going to make our code more readable. And in turn, will also make our code easier to manage.